Hey, how's it going?
Good, thank you. How are things with you?
Things are okay. Yeah, they're okay. They're okay. Thank you for asking. I just thinking of off the back of what we were discussing last week and adulting and all of that great stuff that we have to do. Got me thinking about the student loan conversation. We've had various discussions at varied lengths about this whole student loans debacle, and I'm starting to wonder, does it operate as a tax on aspiration?
That is very interesting. So we are similar in age, but we are two different student loan tiers. I
Mhm.
am plan one. I'll let the listeners decide on where that puts me in an age bracket. And you are plan two.
Yes.
Now, I will admit before we get started in this conversation, I have very little idea or concept of any of the other plans available. I know there's something to do with masters, and I think there's a plan five that people are on now or may not be. Um, but I know, yeah, plan one and plan two, I'm quite familiar with. Um,
Mhm.
Now, I'm definitely of the generation that were told go to university. There's nothing else for you to do. Go to university, and yes, you've got to borrow money, but it's not real. Don't worry about it. Um, I think we were told we'd have to earn 20 or 25 grand. That might be completely made up before you even start repaying. At 18, like I think my parents were content that I was thinking about going to university. No other options were really presented to me. Um, I was I guess a quite a late applier in the process because I wasn't quite sure. But everyone else was going, so why wouldn't I go? Um, I I am still paying my student loan, um, and I don't really. To me, it's not like a noticeable uh, thing. Like it's on my payslip. I pay it. Like there's not much I can do about it. It's to me, I see it kind of sits with the others. My income and national insurance tax. But I do see it as a tax. I don't see it as a loan repayment. But I think it's getting worse and worse for people of um, who are younger, um, because the way in which the loan agreement is structured. So you end up paying more, I believe, if you earn more money.
Yeah.
Um, which obviously you would on a flat rate system, but it's, I guess, if you if you are working, if you've been to university, you get a good job, but you have to work hard in that job to essentially get to a higher salary. Um, I guess it's kind of it kind of feeds into our conversation again. Um, are you actually seeing any net gain? Because I don't I don't think young people are.
There are a few things at play, and some of the factors, right, are what your starting salary is. So when you graduate, what job do you go into, and what does the progression in that job look like if you're to stay in that field? That's one
Mm,
factor. Another factor is what may your other outgoings be? And what do you have as leftover take home? Once you've got all your other deductions, I know some people do play around with paying more into their pensions. Some people take part in various salary sacrifice schemes, whether it's for a car, additional pension on top of what the company provides as standard. So many different things you can play around with, right? And there's also what other income you have. So if you have a salary and then whether you have income from a trust, and that trust perhaps could sit as if it sits as operates as a company and you're an employee of that company, you then get paid through that. That could some of the ways people are receiving inheritance as an example. All of those things come into play. Dividend income, if you have,
Yeah.
again, it could be through inheritance or a side hustle, however it is that people are earning their money. I don't know, but that also matters because you won't necessarily feel the squeeze as much.
Mm.
Then you also have the, oh, well, you may not feel the squeeze as much, but then you also may feel the squeeze as much. It definitely does depend on your individual circumstances. But the point that I'm trying to make is that the thing about the student loan is while it doesn't necessarily operate in the same way that other loans do, in that if you're not able to make a payment one month or accumulate a lot of non-payment consecutive months, then you run the risk of someone trying to come and claim some of your possessions so that they can make
Yeah.
up for what you weren't able to pay. It doesn't operate like that, right? But the difference with the student loan versus other types of loans is you can pay consistently each month what you've been asked to pay or what is expected of you because it comes out of your PAYE, your
Yeah.
PAYE payslip, and all of your other deductions. It operates in that way, the pay as you earn, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of that year, you can find that no matter what you've put in, you still end up having even more that you owe by way of the fact that the interest rate is just set up in a way that you're paying in but not getting anything in
Yeah.
return
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
of the balance on what you owe.
But
And
that was set right. That the lovely people at Rethink Payment, if you were on TikTok or Instagram, break this down really nicely. They are leading a campaign for student loan reform in England and Wales because of the mess that it is in. Um, we spoke about this last week about how businesses protect themselves by inflation plus protection interest rates or
yeah,
increases to their prices, and the student loan company were doing exactly the same. And I believe the interest is now capped at 6% from this financial year for Plan 2 students. But when you look at the current base rate, which is 3.75%, that interest rate is way too high for
yeah,
the type of loan or financial borrowing that was set. Bearing in mind, most of these young people who, I will, you're in this, in this group, right? You were 18. Did you read the 3,000 page T's and C's that were given to you at the time of student loan? Like I didn't. I just signed it. I was like, yeah, free money, let's go. Um,
you're actually not even 18, you're a bit younger. So most
yeah.
people would start thinking about their options. Well, for my generation, we did our GCSEs in year 10 and 11. And it was around that time that you already were being advised to think about what it is you would like to do at university if you were to go. And then by the time you were in first year of college, you were having those conversations, if not visiting universities during your first year to decide where you'd want to go come the it's not called graduation, but come the completion of your A levels. I had an understanding, so I did a lot of reading at the time, albeit not the
Mm.
full terms and conditions of the loan itself, but I did a lot of reading in terms of what was provided as supplementary information at the time. I think some of it, I think it was around the time that people were campaigning for votes, right? And they were advising people, okay, if you vote for me, then I won't, for example, I won't allow for the increase on the student fees cap,
Liberal
right?
Democrats.
Because for the 2012 cohort, who are those who started to pay the Plan 2 people, that came off the back of being promised that the cap on tuition fees was not going to be increased. They did subsequently increase it to 9,000. And that's
Mm.
also part of why that generation has so many frustrations around this is that we many feel that they were missold. In terms of how the loan operated, being told that okay, you won't even start to pay until you're earning for that generation, I think it's about £28,000. And then after 30 years, it's written off. I think Plan 1 is where it's 25 years, isn't it? I think yours is where it's 25 years and it's written off. And then Plan 2 is 30. One of those, right? The
Mm.
thought was it operated as an additional tax. So this essentially is a tax for being a graduate. I understood that and I still signed up for it. There were some other things at play, which without going into all of the detail here, are other factors as to why I said this is a route that I didn't mind. Not everything necessarily came to be as I was told, not just from what was given to us as members of the public, but also financial planning for the future. Some of the things just didn't work out in the way that I had been told or promised, right? I What frustrates me the most about this is just the idea that you're paying off something and it's not actually reducing the overall balance owed. And that's the fundamental part that makes this feel really wrong.
Yeah.
And even if we had all of the information, for me personally, I think I would have probably rethought a lot of the decisions I made at that time, 16, 17 years old. I would have rethought a lot of decisions, perhaps not even gone to university, if I'm honest. I think that might be the first time I said that out loud, but perhaps I wouldn't have gone. And depending on what you earn, that amount that you see on your payslip as having been allocated to your student loan repayment, it's still money. You know, some people say, oh, I don't notice it because it's only a couple of £100. Some people say I don't notice it because it's less than £100. Some people say that they don't notice it because it's whatever amount. But it is
Yeah.
really relative and depends on you and what other outgoings and dependents you may have or liabilities you have, etc. I mean, last week we were talking about the things that come with adulting. I think a lot of people who we read about or we know personally or that we ourselves go through that a couple of £100 could actually make a difference. And it's still money for most people in society. And in terms of it being a tax and aspiration, I think it kind of goes back to the same types of discussions we have about the income tax thresholds and the fact that those haven't been reviewed. I think this financial year, wasn't it the anniversary of the personal savings allowance or I can't remember,
I can't remember.
but it just the idea that that has never been revised is just, I don't know, it, it's not working and it should be.
Mm.
The income tax threshold should be working. The personal savings allowance should be working. But these things are decided and then just not looked at ever again. And as society changes and evolves and all of the expectations we have, they also evolve and what we desire in life, that also evolves. I think it makes sense that we also look at some of these things, these instruments really that were implemented so that we can support each other in society through our taxation, right? It's going to things like your public parks, that not everybody necessarily is using it, but you don't mind paying into something because you know that it's of benefit to
Mm.
others. You can actually see where that money is going. I think that's another frustration. And I know this conversation is about student loan and not income tax as such, but these things all work alongside each other. It's the idea that you're paying into something and there is a return, even if it's not for you directly. We all understand that we have to pay into the system. It's the system that we hope that if there is a time that we need it, we can also benefit from it, right? And if there are other people who need it, they can benefit from it at the time that they need it. I think the idea is just we need to be a lot clearer when
Mm.
explaining to especially young people. And I'd put that as anyone whose frontal lobe is not developed, anyone under 25, I think, especially making decisions that in effect are signing you up to something. It's not signing you up to something for 25 to 30 years. I think there should be a lot more by way of information explaining, and there should be some form of accountability if you've missold something. And I know that then create some blurred, potentially blurred lines with are we holding politicians legally to account?
Mm.
I don't have any immediate thoughts about that at the moment, but just putting that out there is if while campaigning you're saying something that is factually untrue, or you're not explaining some of the intricacies of what it is that you're trying to persuade people to vote for you for,
Yeah.
is that potentially some misrepresentation? I don't know, but it just, I think there should be higher levels of accountability when it comes to those in public office and them also being advocates
Yeah.
of
Well,
of a new system of some kind.
I think the student loan issue has sort of been bumbling along in the background for the past year, 18 months, um, but has really sort of hit headlines this year. And I think largely because there's an increased proportion of younger MPs who have student loans who are now aware of the issue because the previous generation of MPs that went to university didn't have to pay because they got free tuition. Um, and I think there was a material change in the terms of the loan that was issued a few years ago. The chancellor has postponed increasing the threshold, so there is a obviously an issue with uh, the interest threshold where people are now earning more money and therefore falling within this higher rate of interest, um, which you don't get on any other standard loan terms. You are borrowed a set amount of money with an interest rate for repayment over a period of time. Student loans are essentially it's money given to you that starts accruing interest from the day you take it, even though you haven't technically received the goods that you're paying for with it until potentially 3 years or 4 years later. Um, and then if you earn more money or earning more money outside of studying, the higher your income, the higher interest you is added to your account, your balance. Just seems counterintuitive. I suppose the play is that you earn more money, therefore you repay it quicker, but your interest is higher. But what about if
Yeah,
your income isn't steady? Or like
exactly.
or you might only see a meaningful pay rise like once every 2 years. Therefore, every 2 years you're going to see a significant bump in your repayment. Um, the system just feels broken, and I think part of this is yes, there is the lack of political will to fix the situation,
Yes.
which I think is changing because there is a student loan inquiry, I believe, on at the moment. You've got people like the rethink repayment um, campaign on social media. You've got sort of financial influencers on social media who are really starting to highlight the issues faced by young people. But like on our conversation last week, the people who are graduating into these repayment structures of up to 9% of earnings, and up to
Above
what
the
now is
threshold.
capped at six, yeah, above the threshold, and then with a whatever the capped interest is at 6% for higher earners. These are the people that are like setting their lives up, who are looking to buy a house, or paying through the nose for rental accommodation, um, who might be, let's take out the finance bros in the city and Canary Wharf. Let's talk about people who are the junior doctors, the nurses, the paramedics, who all now have to go through essentially uh, capitalized tertiary education, um, who are doing the jobs that are fundamental to sort of a comfortable or
A
developed Western
functioning
society.
society. Yeah.
And we are then disproportionately taxing them through the nose. And if you're a plan five, repaying for 40 years. It's longer than like mortgage repayments. Whilst, and I know that this argument is that it's written off, but surely you're just writing off a greater chunk of interest because you're not repaying your loan. Um,
Yes.
which again, it just in practical terms just feels ludicrous. Like the system just makes no sense. I imagine it was thought up by some consulting genius at one of the big four who said, "Look, this is a really good idea," and Tony Blair's government was like, "Yeah, great, thanks. Here's your multi-million-pound fee for coming up with the structure." And actually, it was David Cameron, wasn't it, that introduced
It
higher
was funny.
higher interest, higher tuition fees. But
The
it
coalition
just
government.
feels like you want people to go to university, get good jobs in inverted commas, and contribute to society, but you penalize them for doing so for 40 years of their life and expect them to then buy a house, have children, run a car. I just, the over, I guess the overcapitalization of education has become, it's a business that is too big to fail now. And therefore the system exists and we just have to keep it, you know, because we spoke about this in the last series, that even though the costs are increasing, the number of applications to university isn't dwindling. So there is obviously an attraction to young people to keep going to university, despite the fact that it's going to cost them money in the long term. Now, whether that is because they're not borrowing or their parents are adopting more of an American style of, like college funds from younger ages, or there are a higher proportion of people who are being funded by mum and dad for longer and
Yeah.
through university.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that that kind of doesn't. It makes it meaningless to a degree, right? Because everyone's got a piece of paper then. So how do you differentiate, or how do we supply all of our areas of our economy for making sure that we've got good technical jobs, we've got people that know how to plumb and wire and build things. We may need fewer people that read English, um,
Mm.
but I don't. You're not. There is just seems to be this sort of it made it made lots of money and it created an industry. And let's not forget that there is a huge impact outside of just the educational provision. There is still, halls of residence, private halls of residence. There are various things that are sort of increasing the cost of being a student. Um, I just don't know if the system has seen its boom and is now entering its bust, and there's a lot of people that were missold um, essentially a financial product as a teenager.
Yeah, and I think that's the key part. And I'd also suggest that perhaps some of those, well, many of those students who are still desiring to go to university have two other factors that influence them. One is that our education system hasn't changed fundamentally, right? So the curriculum is still the same as it was when we were at school. And so they're still pushing the idea that you need to have a degree in order to get by in life, right? Then the second thing is that many of people who are school aged now perhaps aren't looking at what's going on in through the media to other graduates
Mm,
from previous generations and what they're going through. So I think those are potentially two factors that are influencing the fact that there are so many students who desire to go. I also wonder if there's something to be said about the non-changing education system in that are people aware of the career paths that are available to them that do not require a degree and do not then have associated debt that you will never repay.
mm,
As much as I do think that the student loan system should be working and it's not working, I do want to emphasize that we do have a better system than some of the other ones across the world where you see the loan operating as a traditional loan where you have debt and where you can have repossessions of your homes, your goods, in order to meet the payments. You have
mm.
people judging you if, for example, you're doing a credit check and they see how much you've got to student loans. Those types of things don't happen. And I think that fundamentally is a great thing for us here in the UK. But still, we still have the right to say that this is not working for our society, right? And it should be working. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of this inquiry. I think um, it started this year.
Mm.
Definitely started this year when they opened the official inquiry into the student loan system. But I still don't necessarily have that much optimism in the idea that they will fundamentally change anything. I would love to be wrong. I'd love to come back on a future episode and we can talk about how great the new system is, or we can dissect it and discuss how we're feeling the actual change on our take home. But to answer
Yeah,
the initial,
mm,
yeah, to answer the
yeah,
initial topic of, is it a tax on aspiration? In theory, yes, but in practice, based on what you said, perhaps not everyone is actually caring that much about it. They still think it's okay, it's another deduction on the payslip along with your NI, your pension, and income tax. But yeah, I don't like it and I don't think it works.
yeah. I must admit, I don't think the system works overall. And I think we've spoken about this in the first season around the need and other alternatives into, if I was 17, is that how old you are before you apply? 16, 17, thinking about it, I would be looking at, yeah, alternative routes. I mean, if someone had told me at 18 I could be a plumber and work 3 days a week and, you know, earn over 100 grand without any student debt, I'd bite their hand off. Um, but the apprenticeship schemes, degree apprentices, you're working and studying, so you get your degree, but you do not accumulate any debt. Um, there are other ways, I think, and other paths out there. Um, and also, I think one of the important things for people to remember is that you can go and work and do things and always go back to university. Um,
Yeah,
and there isn't, but I guess there is a real difficulty. People are sort of churn through it. It's a system, right? It's basically prints money. Someone is making money from this somewhere along the line. Um, and I don't feel like it's the taxpayer, because I feel, th- I imagine a lot of the accounting or the lot of money that's written off is actually just unpaid interest. We should be focused on people repaying their principals, and not focus on interest, adding lots of interest into something that inflates the value of the debt. Um, is it? Is it? Yeah, it is a tax on aspiration. I think it, whilst the numbers, um, are not stopping people from going to university, it will be interesting to see if people who are on plan 2 and plan 5 are working out when it's financially right to stop progressing, because there is a cap
Mm,
before you start getting into a tax trap, and whether you end up with a generation or a workforce of people that don't want anything more because financially it's just not viable for them or worth their interest, with all of the other implications that happen when you hit certain earnings. So it's definitely an interesting one to watch. Um, and yeah, if you're, if you do want more information, there's loads out there. Rethink repayment is a great source, and the guys are leading an awesome campaign. Um, but it is, I think it's a pretty shitty system, that people, again, there's no, it's a pretty shitty system that doesn't offer many options for a lot of people. But yeah, I think that's all for today. I will catch you next week.
catch you next week.